You know that feeling when you completely lose your cool at a colleague over something like entirely trivial.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then like 5 minutes later, you're wondering who exactly took over your brain. Or when you watch a brilliant friend make a wildly baffling, obviously destructive romantic choice.
Right. And you just think, what on earth are they doing?
Exactly. Or, maybe you just find yourself staring at your own repeated self-destructive habits and you start wondering who is actually at the steering wheel of your life. Well, welcome to today's deep dive.
It is such a good topic today.
It really is. We are putting a mineralogist magnifying glass right over the human mind to decode the invisible forces that dictate your behavior. Our mission today is to understand the stranger within you, relying on a phenomenal stack of insights from Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature.
And I mean, it is the single most critical mission you can undertake, mostly because we have to shatter a very comfortable illusion right off the bat. We humans, well, we love to flatter ourselves.
Oh, we really do.
We build these towering societal narratives where we are these hyper-rational creatures. Like we are largely conscious, totally in control of our own wills, and just making decisions based purely on logic.
Yeah, but the reality is entirely different, isn't it?
Exactly. We are actually driven by ancient, primitive forces simmering just below the surface,
Hmm.
and they are operating almost completely outside of our conscious awareness.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because we all know we have this ancient survival-based wiring fighting against our modern prefrontal cortex. But what the sources really highlight is the severe lag time in our evolutionary hardware.
Right. It's a massive lag.
I like to think of the human brain as essentially a house that has been endlessly renovated over millions of years. We went and installed this state-of-the-art smart home system.
And neocortex, right.
Yeah, our logic, our language centers. But we are still running that entire complex system on faulty, ancient plumbing that leaks violently whenever there is even a little bit of pressure.
What's fascinating here is the mechanism behind those leaks. Those early emotional surges originally served a very specific, fleeting survival purpose. Before complex language developed, emotions were simply brief physical arousals.
Like a fight or flight response.
Exactly. Imagine an early human sensing a predator. A sudden spike of fear releases a cocktail of chemicals, like adrenaline and cortisol. That makes the animal hyper-aware of danger for a split second.
So it can run away or fight.
Right, allowing it to react. And then, crucially, the emotion is supposed to dissipate. The chemicals flush out. But humans, with our massive, highly developed neocortex, we don't just feel an emotion and let it pass.
No, we definitely do not.
We stew in it, we hold on to that temporary chemical spike of fear, and we mentally rehearse it until it becomes chronic anxiety.
So our smart home system traps the leak, basically.
That's a great way to put it, yes. And because these primitive emotions are processed in a completely different older part of the brain than where our language is processed, there is a massive biological disconnect.
A disconnect between what we feel and how we translate it to ourselves, right?
Exactly. Think about envy. You might feel deep, painful envy toward a friend's success. But because envy is a socially unacceptable and uncomfortable emotion to admit, your brain mistranslates it to protect your ego.
Oh, I see.
It translates that envy into something more palatable and empowering, like self-righteous anger or harsh judgment of their character. You think you're being morally objective, but you're just experiencing a biological mistranslation.
So we're essentially walking around with this leaky ancient plumbing, constantly trying to use our new smart home logic to explain away the massive puddles on the floor.
Yeah, pretty much.
Which, I mean, begs the question. If we're all biologically wired to flood like this, how did anyone in history ever manage to build a functioning, rational society?
It's a miracle we ever did.
Right. Well, the sources give us a brilliant case study in managing the leaks, going all the way back to ancient Athens. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, the Pericles story.
Yeah, so the city is facing this existential threat from its archenemy Sparta. You've got the Athenian assembly gathered on a hill, 10,000 men panicking, shouting, just completely ruled by their ancient survival wiring.
Pure limbic system takeover.
Exactly. But then Pericles steps up, and Pericles operates entirely differently from the flashy, aggressive, risk-taking politicians that the mob usually loved.
He was different because he understood his own biology, even if he didn't have the modern neuroscience to describe it back then.
Right, he wouldn't know the word amygdala.
No, but he had systematically trained himself to suppress his ego. He worshipped a concept he called nous, the ancient Greek word for mind or intelligence.
Which he personified as his inner Athena, right? The goddess of practical wisdom.
Exactly. Whenever Pericles felt anger or insecurity welling up, like whenever he felt that primitive chemical cocktail flooding his system, his rule was simple. He would not react.
He would just shut down.
He would physically retreat to his home, sometimes for days, just refusing to make a decision until the chemicals subsided and he could see reality clearly.
Wow. For days.
Yeah. Because of this rigid rational restraint, he initiated brilliant long-term strategies. He avoided needless wars, oversaw the building of the Parthenon, and instituted a highly disciplined defensive war strategy against Sparta.
By just bringing everyone inside the city walls, right?
Using their superior navy to supply the city and simply refusing to fight the unbeatable Spartan army on land. And it was working beautifully.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second. If Pericles is just locking himself in his house to avoid feeling anything, doesn't that make him sort of, I don't know, robotic?
That's a common criticism, man.
Because if we completely subtract emotion, don't we lose the exact passion, creativity, and drive that builds something like the Parthenon in the first place? I mean, we don't want to become unfeeling machines.
And that is the exact trap most people fall into when discussing rationality. Rationality is not the elimination of emotion at all.
Okay, so what is it then?
The sources clarify this using a really powerful ancient Greek metaphor: the rider and the horse. The horse represents our emotional nature.
Got
It has tremendous energy, speed, power, and movement. We absolutely do not want to kill the horse, because without it, we have no forward momentum whatsoever.
Right, we just stand still.
Exactly. But without a rider, that wild, powerful horse will just get spooked and gallop right off a cliff. The rider is our thinking self, our nous.
So rationality is just the rider holding the reins.
Yes, guiding that immense necessary emotional energy toward a productive, deliberate destination.
Okay, that makes sense. And the sources show us the horrific consequences of what happens when the rider gets thrown off the horse.
Oh, it gets bad.
Tragically, a plague hits Athens, and Pericles catches it and dies. Without him, without that singular rational rider holding the reins of the city, the Athenians completely abandon his disciplined strategy.
They just fall apart.
They succumb to the loud, aggressive politicians of the war party. They give in to emotional mob rule, and they decide to launch the disastrous Sicilian expedition.
Pure hubris.
Literally. Looking for a quick victory and massive riches, they vote to send 60 ships to attack Syracuse. And when a seasoned general tries to logically warn them that it's a terrible idea.
Because it would require a massively larger force to even stand a chance.
Right. Instead of sobering up and reconsidering, the mob just doubles down on their greed. They vote to send 100 ships.
Unbelievable.
It's a total catastrophe. They lose the fleet, they lose the army, and it leads directly to the complete destruction of the Athenian Empire.
Well, the Sicilian expedition perfectly illustrates the mechanics of a viral group effect. High-grade emotions like the sudden, intoxicating greed and unbridled optimism the Athenians felt, they literally act like a contagion.
A literal virus.
Yeah, when we are in a large group, our brains release oxytocin and dopamine when we align with the herd. It rewards us for conforming.
So we literally get high off of agreeing with the mob.
Exactly. And this overwhelming chemical reward system completely short-circuits any individual reasoning powers. They ceased to be rational citizens and became a single feeling organism.
Completely disconnected from the reality of their military vulnerability.
Precisely.
Now, most of us aren't voting to send massive naval armadas to Sicily, but we are making our own disastrous, irrational votes every single day.
Because of specific cognitive biases.
Right, because your brain is actively setting tripwires for you to make sure the horse stays in control. Take confirmation bias, for example.
That's a big one.
You look at a set of facts and you truly feel you are being a neutral, objective judge. But mechanically, your brain is only releasing dopamine when you find evidence that supports what you already desire to be true.
While blinding you to everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then there's conviction bias. If a leader or a salesperson is loud, dramatic, and emotionally volatile, our primitive wiring reads that intensity as certainty.
So we secretly believe they must be telling the truth.
Yes. Meanwhile, we view someone who speaks with nuance and hesitation as weak. But the most dangerous tripwire is blame bias.
Oh, absolutely. Blame bias is huge.
When we make a major mistake, the ego experiences that failure as a literal physical threat. It is just too painful to look at our own flaws, so we aggressively project the blame outward onto other forces.
And the deep dive sources point to the 2008 financial crash as a sweeping, modern example of this blame bias in action.
Now, we need to be clear here. Economists, politicians, and historians heavily debate the complex, overlapping causes of the 2008 crash.
Oh, of course.
And we certainly aren't here to endorse one specific economic theory or political viewpoint over another, but the text uses this historical moment to illustrate a specific psychological phenomenon regarding how we distribute blame.
Exactly. The psychological observation is about our collective reluctance to examine our own behavior. After the crash, the public pointed fingers at trade imbalances, highly complex algorithmic computer models.
The lack of government regulation.
Right, and predatory lenders, all of which, played major roles. But what society vehemently refused to look at was the role of the individual.
The individual buyers and sellers.
Yes. Millions of individual buyers and sellers became infected with the emotional pull of easy money. When you introduce the prospect of sudden unearned wealth, it triggers the exact same dopamine rush in the primitive brain as finding a massive, unexpected food source in the wild.
Wow. So it bypasses the neocortex entirely.
It completely bypasses it. People succumb to unbridled optimism. They ignored obvious historical warnings about housing bubbles because the chemical lure of getting rich quick overwhelmed their rational writers.
Psychologically, it was far easier to blame a faceless computer model or a distant regulator than to admit our collective irrational greed.
It always is.
And those massive macroeconomic events, they're driven by the exact same triggers that ruin our personal lives. The sources outline micro-triggers that instantly cause us to lose our rationality.
Like early childhood wounds.
Yeah. You might be in a relationship, and your partner gives you a very mild, completely normal critique about how you loaded the dishwasher.
We've all been there.
Right. But suddenly, you explode with blinding rage, or you withdraw completely into a shell. Why? Because that mild critique subconsciously triggered a deep, primitive wound of maternal abandonment or childhood inadequacy.
Your plumbing isn't reacting to the dishwasher.
No. It is reacting to an event from 20 years ago. You are also triggered by experiencing sudden gains or sudden losses which scramble your brain chemistry.
Or by dealing with inflaming individuals.
Ugh, yes. Narcissistic people who constantly manufacture drama specifically to force an emotional reaction out of you. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? True science is actually looking for evidence that disconfirms our most cherished beliefs.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it shows that rationality is not a natural birthright. It's a muscle that must be worked out.
How so?
Well, the sources offer a brilliant blueprint by looking at the life of the famous Russian writer Anton Chekhov.
Yeah, I love this example.
Chekhov grew up in a profoundly toxic environment with a terribly abusive alcoholic father. The natural biological reaction to that upbringing would be lifelong, paralyzing rage and bitterness.
The horse running off the cliff, basically.
Exactly. But Chekhov systematically trained himself to look at his father not with anger, but as a neutral fact of nature.
Like a scientist.
He decided to view his father the way a scientist views a comet or a poisonous plant. He cut his abuser down to human size, objectively analyzing his father's broken logic, his deep insecurities, and his pathetic flaws.
Wow.
By stepping back and viewing his father as a mechanical phenomenon to be studied rather than a demon to be feared, Chekhov completely neutralized his own emotional turmoil.
So if Chekhov could do that with an abusive parent, how does that translate to the rest of the world? Especially when we are dealing with people today who actively drain our energy.
Like those inflaming, toxic narcissists.
Exactly. The text dives deeply into this, noting that every single human being is on the narcissistic spectrum.
We all are.
Because we are social animals, we all crave attention for our basic biological survival. If people don't look at us, if we aren't acknowledged by the tribe, we begin to subconsciously doubt our own existence.
We do. But there is a massive mechanical difference between healthy narcissism and deep, toxic narcissism, and it all comes down to early childhood development.
Specifically, that critical window between the ages of 2 and 5.
Right. In a healthy development cycle, as a toddler slowly begins to physically and emotionally separate from their parents, they experience anxiety. But over time, they internalize the parent's soothing voice and comforting gaze.
They build up a realistic, stable self-image based on that early validation.
And that self-image acts as a permanent internal thermostat.
I love that analogy, an internal thermostat.
It's so accurate. As an adult, when you experience moments of deep doubt or when you are alone and not getting validation from the crowd, your internal thermostat kicks in.
You can literally self-soothe.
You generate your own warmth. That is healthy self-esteem.
But with deep narcissists, there was a catastrophic break in that specific developmental window.
Usually caused by parents who either entirely abandon the child emotionally, providing no soothing days to internalize.
Or the exact opposite, right? Parents who are enmeshers.
Yes, enmeshing parents suffocate the child, never letting them separate. They treat the toddler merely as an extension of their own ego.
And because of this developmental break, the deep narcissist never constructs an internal thermostat. They have no core self to retreat to when it gets cold.
So they become entirely desperately dependent on the attention of others to feel alive.
If they are introverts, they retreat into a bizarre fantasy world where they are vastly superior, unappreciated geniuses.
And if they are extroverts, they physically monopolize every room they walk into, demanding constant, exhausting validation.
Dealing with a deep narcissist is literally like being locked in a house with zero insulation during a freezing blizzard.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Because they have no internal thermostat to keep themselves warm, they demand that you act as their furnace, constantly burning up your own emotional energy just to keep them from freezing to death.
And this raises an important question, because it becomes incredibly dangerous when deep narcissists attain positions of leadership or power.
Right, because they have a bigger audience.
Because they desperately need that continuous, roaring hit of public attention to feel a sense of self, they will intentionally manufacture constant drama, chaos, and conflict.
They need perpetual emergencies to justify their power and to keep all eyes glued to them.
Exactly. It creates a profoundly toxic environment for anyone caught in their orbit, which forces the listener to ask, how do you defend against this? When you are trapped in the blizzard with someone demanding you be their furnace, how do you protect your energy?
Yeah, how do you survive that?
The answer lies in transforming your own self-love into outward analytical empathy.
Empathy. Wait, that sounds entirely counterintuitive. How does feeling bad for a toxic person protect me from them?
Well, it isn't about feeling bad for them, and it certainly isn't about sympathizing with their behavior. It is about using empathy as an analytical tool.
Okay, unpack that for me.
When a deep narcissist attacks you, insults you, or tries to pull you into their manufactured drama, your natural, ancient biological reaction is to take it personally.
Your ego flares up.
You ask, do they like me? Why are they treating me this way? You get instantly defensive, which means your leaky plumbing is flooding and they're controlling your behavior.
Right.
But if you force a shift in your focus outward, using analytical empathy to ask, why are they acting this way? What gaping, terrifying internal emptiness are they desperately trying to fill right now?
You instantly change the power dynamic.
You step in to check off shoes, you see them as a neutral fact of nature, a broken biological system operating on severely flawed primitive logic.
Right. So analytical empathy is how you realize you don't need to be their furnace.
Yeah.
You just look at them objectively and recognize the house is uninsulated.
You stop trying to warm them up and you just observe the structural damage.
Precisely. That shift in perspective completely robs toxic people of their power over you because you are no longer reacting emotionally to their provocations.
You are simply observing their ancient plumbing malfunctioning from a safe, rational distance.
So bringing all of this immense machinery together for you, the listener, the truth is your brain is fundamentally a piece of ancient biology. It is wired to react instantly, selfishly, and emotionally to preserve your survival in a world that honestly no longer exists.
Yeah, a completely different world.
Your cognitive biases are constantly working overtime behind the scenes to shield your fragile ego from the painful truth of your own mistakes. And those deeply toxic, exhausting people in your life, they aren't all powerful monsters.
No, they really aren't.
They are just deeply broken individuals who never managed to build an internal thermostat. So your mission, based on the laws of human nature we've unpacked today, is to cultivate what the sources call the maker's mindset.
The maker's mindset.
It is about focusing intensely on reality as it is, accepting people as neutral biological facts rather than getting swept up in their manufactured drama, and doing the hard daily work of letting your inner Athena hold the reins of your wild emotional horse.
It is entirely about reclaiming your own agency from your biology and to leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over today as you go back out into the world.
I love this part.
Imagine if, starting right now, every single time you felt a sudden, hot surge of anger, a sharp sting of defensiveness, or a desperate, hollow need for external validation, you forced yourself to pause for just 1 extra second.
Just 1 second.
Think about the gravity of that. What if that single second of delayed reaction, that tiny deliberate gap between feeling an ancient impulse and actually taking action? What if that is the only real difference between being a helpless pawn of your evolutionary hardware and becoming the undisputed architect of your own destiny?